Why you wouldn't survive a medieval winter. Imagine waking up, not to the glow of a heated home, but to your own breath rising like smoke in the air above your blanket. There is no glass in the window, only a shutter, swollen with moisture and slightly ajar. The wind creeps in like a rumour, and the floor, made of packed earth or warped wood, is hard beneath your bare feet. You slept in your clothes. Everyone does. Layers are not for style, but for survival. Wool tunics, a hood drawn close, stockings that never seem quite dry. And still the cold gets in. This is not a night in the wilderness, this is a house, a hut, your home. But in winter, even home turns against you. The fire has gone out. The embers, faint and stubborn, hide beneath the ash. You keep a few twigs near your bed, dry if you're lucky, but firewood is precious. It was gathered in autumn, when the days were crisp and the trees dry. Now it's stored in bundles behind the house, but it's damp. Everything is damp, the walls, the straw, even your bread. And food is thinning. The cabbages, once firm, are turning. The salted meat is almost gone. Root vegetables keep longer, but you've already eaten the good ones. What remains is misshapen, bitter and bruised. There are no fresh eggs. Your hens have stopped laying. There is no milk. The goat dried up weeks ago. Grain is locked in sacks, precious and rationed. Each bowl of pottage feels thinner than the last. But you eat slowly, carefully, because the road to spring is long. Outside, the land is pale with frost. The well, if it hasn't frozen, gives water so cold it aches in your teeth. If it has frozen, you chip at it with a stone. You do not complain. Because there are worse things than cold. You've heard the wolves again. Not many. Just once, last week. Far off, near the tree line. A sound like a cough wrapped in a howl. You said nothing, but you noticed how your father lingered near the livestock longer that night. How your mother placed a sharp stick near the door. You live near others, yes, but not close enough. In winter, isolation deepens. Roads vanish beneath snow, and visitors bring more hunger than help. You hope no one comes. You hope nothing comes. And so, you do as they always have. You wait. You mend your clothes with frozen fingers. You burn straw if wood runs low. You scrape moss from trees, boil it if you must. You tell stories at night, not to be entertained, but to feel warmer by remembering warmer things. And always you listen, to the rafters creaking, to the wind humming through the eaves, to the long, long silence between footsteps. Because winter in the medieval world was not an event, it was an occupation, a test, a season that did not ask permission and gave no guarantees. If you were wealthy, you layered furs and tapestries. If you were poor, you layered hope and routine. And if you survived, it was not through comfort, but through patience. In spring, the cold would soften, and the first green shoots would push through the thawing mud. But until then, the world would sleep with its eyes half open, and you would sleep lightly, if at all. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. Europe's forgotten climate catastrophe and its chilling toll. Let us stay within the quiet of this cold and shift our gaze, not to a single home or village, but across an entire continent, across hills and rivers and mountains, where the frost did not simply settle, but stayed. The years were 1315 to 1317, and though their names are not etched into common memory, they mark one of the most harrowing winters in medieval history. Not because of a single event, but because of something slower, colder, more relentless. The Great Famine. It began not with snow, but with rain. Imagine the year turning, as it always does, from late winter into spring. Farmers in small villages hitch oxen to ploughs. They till the soil, waiting for a dry window between showers. But this time, the rain doesn't stop. April becomes May, May becomes June, and still the skies remain low and grey. Water pools in the fields, seeds rot. The earth turns to mire. In England, in France, in the Low Countries, in parts of Scandinavia and beyond, it is the same. And then autumn comes, but there is no harvest. Some fields yield nothing at all, others only scraps. Grain is soaked and mouldy. Hay for livestock lies in ruined bundles. What little is gathered must be dried by the hearth, handful by handful to keep from spoiling. But even the hearths are weak. Wood is scarce, and what can be burned is too wet to catch. Winter arrives earlier than usual, harsher, colder. It is as if the land itself has withdrawn into itself, refusing to offer what it once gave freely. And so hunger begins. Not a sharp, sudden thing, but a slow tightening, a bowl that holds less each day, a cupboard that once had something, now bare. People begin to make choices. First, They eat what was meant for spring, seed set aside for planting. Then they eat their animals, hens first, then pigs, then goats. For those who have none, there are roots, mosses, and bitter bark. In towns, bread prices soar. In the countryside, there is no bread to price. Imagine this not for a week, not for a month, but for more than 2 years. Through it all, the rain comes again and again. The sky's never fully clear. The sun, when it appears, feels distant, diamond-sois, and never quite enough. By 1316, entire communities are strained to the edge. Chroniclers of the time, often monks in monasteries, record not only starvation, but what it did to the spirit. Theft increased. Travel halted. Parents, it is said in hushed tones, abandoned their children. Some even speak of darker acts, unspoken, recorded only in vague terms and solemn lines. Pestilence followed hunger. Not the plague, not yet, but disease born of weakness, of damp shelters, of unwashed hands and spoiled food. The dead were buried quickly, sometimes anonymously. There were no grand funerals, only the muffled sound of shovels in wet earth. And yet, most people did not perish. They endured. With bellies hollow and coats threadbare, they endured. Children grew thinner, adults older than their years, and still they waited. By late 1317, the rains finally relented. The soil, exhausted, began to yield again, slowly, cautiously. But the famine's shadow would linger for decades. It left behind not just fewer people, but fewer illusions. Communities tightened. Trust, once given freely, was guarded. And when the Black Death arrived just a generation later, it found a population already scarred, already cautious. The Great Famine was a quiet disaster. There are no songs about it, no great paintings, no tales of heroism, only the memory of a cold that went too deep, and a hunger that lasted too long. It was not a moment, it was a season stretched thin. And as the skies cleared at last and the first shoots of grain reached up through the thawing soil, Europe exhaled softly and began slowly to live again. Winter solstice, rites and Candlemas, pagan traditions and church holidays that warmed the darkest days. Now let us turn away from the hunger and toward the hearth. Not all moments of a medieval winter were marked by silence and struggle. Even in the coldest times, people found ways to light a candle, both literally and symbolically. Long before thermometers and calendars marked the darkest day, ancient people understood one thing. There came a point in winter when the night stopped growing longer, when the sun, though still shy, began to return. That moment, the winter solstice, was sacred. In the centuries before Christianity shaped the European calendar, solstice rituals marked hope, rebirth, the endurance of light. Fires were lit not only for warmth, but to echo the sun's light, reminding all who gathered that the darkness would not last forever. In the forests of northern Europe, evergreen boughs were brought into homes, not for decoration, but as a symbol, a reminder that life still pulsed in the roots of the world, even as frost clung to the branches. Holly, ivy, mistletoe, plants that thrived despite the cold, were revered for their quiet strength, and the gathering itself mattered most. Families, neighbours, and entire villages would mark the solstice not with spectacle, but with shared presence. Singing, soft dancing, the telling of stories passed down across generations. There was no exact date, no ticking clock, but the moment was felt. And as Christianity spread across the continent, many of these quiet customs were folded gently into new traditions. The solstice gave way to Christmas, a time still rich in firelight, in evergreens, in the promise of renewal. But while Christmas brought a burst of celebration, another winter tradition came later, quieter, and perhaps even more intimate. It was Candlemas. Observed on February 2nd, Candlemas marked the presentation of the infant Christ at the temple, 40 days after his birth. But beneath the Christian framing lay older echoes, the halfway point between winter and spring. In the church, candles were blessed, hundreds of them, carried by procession through narrow streets, flickering in the still cold air. These were not only sacred lights, they were home lights, lights for the year ahead. Families would take them back, place them beside the hearth, and light them during storms, illness, or birth. A single flame became a kind of promise. Outside, the fields were still bare. Snow sometimes still lay thick, but inside, Candlemas offered something softer, a ritual of waiting, of trust, of faith that the world would warm again. Some saw it as a turning point. They watched the weather on Candlemas morning. If the skies were bright, it meant winter would stretch longer, but if the day was cloudy, it meant spring would come sooner. You might hear echoes of this belief today in stories of groundhogs and shadows, but in the medieval world it was not superstition, it was hope, clothed in observation. Because in a world with no thermostats, no central heating, and no guarantees, people turned to rhythm, ritual, light. They gathered when they could, sang what they remembered, shared what they had, and each winter the same symbols returned, not because they changed the weather, but because they changed the heart. Even in the leanest years, someone would find a sprig of holly. Even in the darkest hours, a candle would be lit. And the flame, though small, would be enough. Enough to remind a tired mother, enough to warm the calloused hands of a father, enough to make a child look forward, enough simply to go on. Winter in the castle versus winter in the hut, the very different ways warmth was won or lost. Let us now travel, not through time, but across a short distance, one that might take no more than a few minutes on foot. Yet it is a journey between two very different worlds. On one side, a stone castle perched on a rise, its towers half shrouded in morning mist. On the other, a cluster of low, timber-framed huts, their thatched roofs heavy with frost, huddled like sheep at the base of the hill. Both feel the same winter. Both know the same shortening of days. But the experience of cold, of how warmth was won or lost, was shaped not only by season, but by class. Let us begin in the hut, a single room. Walls of wattle and daub, woven wooden strips plastered with a mix of earth, straw, and dung. A thatched roof, often leaking by midwinter, patched with moss and whatever could be found. Inside, the floor is bare earth, tamped hard, sometimes scattered with reeds to absorb moisture. The fire burns low in a central hearth, but there is no chimney. The smoke drifts upward, finds cracks, or simply lingers in the room, curling around rafters before seeping through the thatch. The people inside breathe in the smoke, their eyes water, but they are used to it. There may be a small window, shuttered with no glass, or none at all. At night they rely on the fire's glow, and if a candle is lit, it is used sparingly. They sleep close together for warmth. Parents, children, sometimes even animals. The piglet that might be slaughtered in spring lies in a corner, wrapped in old cloth. The heat, such as it is, does not stay long. The walls are too thin, the roof too open, and so warmth is found not in comfort, but in presence. Now, walk with me to the castle. From the outside, it appears grand, imposing, built of stone with tall towers, arched gates, and thick walls. But stone is no friend to warmth. Inside the great hall, a fire burns in a vast hearth, sometimes as wide as a small room. Logs the size of a man's leg feed it. Smoke rises into a central louvre, an open vent in the roof, or is channeled through the beginnings of early chimneys. Tapestries hang on the walls, not only for beauty but to soften the echo and blunt the cold that seeps from the stone. The lord sits on a raised dais, cloaked in fur, hands wrapped around a goblet of warmed wine. Servants move in and out, carrying trenchers, stoking the fire, sweeping away ash. There are candles, yes, but they drip and sputter, and even their light cannot chase away the chill from the high-vaulted ceiling. And in the private chambers? There are bed curtains, feather mattresses, and braziers of glowing coals. But still, in the early morning, ice can form inside the windows, if there are windows at all. Water in basins sometimes freezes overnight. Metal clasps on clothing sting the skin. So warmth here, too, is managed, not assumed. Maintained with effort, cost, and constant tending. And while the noble family may eat meat, honeyed cakes, and imported spices to cheer the long nights, the castle staff, cooks, grooms, pages, feel something closer to what the villagers know. The cold is democratic, but its remedies are not. Back in the village, warmth is shared in the form of labour. One neighbour helps patch another's roof. Children fetch wood from the wood's edge. A midwife travels across the frost to bring comfort to a new mother. No coin changes hands, only endurance and gratitude. In the castle, warmth is orchestrated. Logs are measured. Coal, if available, is rationed. Servants rise early to light fires so the lord never wakes cold. But in both places, under fur or under straw, winter teaches the same lesson. That warmth is not just a temperature. It is a rhythm, a ritual, a relationship. It is the passing of a bowl still steaming, the hush of a shared song, the brushing of hands beside the hearth. And when spring finally breaks, when ice recedes and the first buds return, it is not only the land that breathes easier. It is every soul who made it through the long, quiet dark. Conclusion, a gentle reflection. And now, as our journey through the cold draws to a close, take a moment to feel the quiet that lingers. Not the bitter edge of frost, but the hush that follows it. The stillness of a world that has endured, Medieval winters were not survived through comfort, but through community, through custom, through candles and patience, through listening to the sky, to the earth, and to one another. The people of that time may not have known insulation or electricity, but they knew something else: how to wait with dignity, how to welcome light when it returned, and how to keep a small flame alive, even when the world turned to ice. As you lie now, warm and still, know that across time others lay in silence too, listening to the wind, holding close to one another, and waiting always for the thaw. Thank you for being here, and good night.